Now bear witness as the same fantastic powers that forged the universe forge this most mighty creature! Rank up Xyz's evolution! Rise up, Neo Galaxy Eye Cipher Dragon!
Alright, so let's start this video off by going through the archetype as a whole. We're going to start by recapping everything that already exists, and then we're going to get into the new support that was announced for Animation Chronicle. I want to take a look through the archetype as a whole because I did decide to put together a deck profile build with this. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I've played some games, did some testing, which is what took a little longer on this video. But I also grabbed a couple of other deck builds that I saw online. I wasn't a huge fan of them either, but it was just sort of the very loose inspiration that I used to put an idea together. But that's getting a little bit further ahead of us. Let's get into the video, talk about the archetype as a whole, what they do, and then we will move forward from there. So first up is Cipher Mirror Knight. This is a level 4 light warrior monster, so it has really solid typing. When a Cipher monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can discard this card, then send one card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and special summon that destroyed monster. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add one Cipher card from your deck to your hand. This is a hard once per turn. It's interesting because that effect is not terrible. It's like a Dark Soul type effect, and there are other ways to pull it off where it's not going to necessarily require you to utilize that battle destruction. In my playtesting, the second effect came up more often than the first one. That battle destruction is extremely specific, and as a general rule, I just don't think cards that are reliant on battle destruction are very good in today's day and age. But it's not too bad because it's just an added bonus to what this card does otherwise. Typically, you're either summoning it to special summon another one of the monsters and go into an Xyz play, or you're discarding it for something else and getting a search later. So it's not the worst card, definitely could be better, but this is also an older archetype for the most part that doesn't have that level of power creep that some modern archetypes do, considering this came out, I think it was 2016 initially, and hasn't really gotten much support since then. Now, many of you guys remember this card as Kinetic Soldier. It was renamed as Cipher Soldier because of the way the kanji worked in Japan. The card was never actually Kinetic Soldier, and once the Cipher archetype was released, this card got that name changed so it could appropriately be used in it. I don't really know why, because it has zero synergy with the archetype. However, if this card battles a warrior monster, during damage calculation, this card gains 2,000 attack. During damage calculation only. Not a great card. It was used back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, to counter things like Six Samurai, where you could summon it, you would side it in, you could run over a Shien with it. It's had its niche uses over the years when warrior decks were dominant, but in today's day and age, it is very, very lackluster. I actually elected not to play this at all in my build, and I didn't see it in any of the builds that I used as a bit of a representation either. But it is a Cipher card, so I figured I would include. This one is probably my favorite of the previous era of Cipher cards before the new stuff was announced. This is Cipher Twin Raptor. Level 4 Machine, Light Monster. If your opponent controls a face-up monster that was special summoned from the extra deck and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Super restrictive. I mean, that was, would have been solid back in the day. It's not impossible to pull off, but typically if you're going first, it's impossible to use. And secondly, your opponent's likely going to have ways to stop you from going further with it, so that effect doesn't come up as often as I'd like. What does make this card neat is its Summoner Monk-like effect that says you can discard one card, special summon one Cipher monster from your hand or deck. However, you cannot special summon for the rest of the turn except Cipher monsters. This restriction is not great, but the fact that it says rest of the turn does give it at least some usability. You can use this to bring out Biplane, which is the best combo, but there are other combos you can do as well, like bringing out the level 4 Mirror Knight, and then using a spell to double their levels, and going into one of your Cipher Xyz and getting a search off Mirror Knight during the end phase. Twin Raptor is probably one of your best combo pieces and does allow you to go off, but it does have those restrictions locking you into Ciphers for the rest of the turn that makes it a lot weaker than it could be in your ideal situations. Now, one that doesn't have much in terms of restrictions is Cipher Wing. Originally released in Dragons of Legend Unleashed, this was a newer wave of Cipher support, although there weren't many cards that came out with it. If you control a Cipher monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You contribute this card, increase the levels of all Cipher monsters you control by 4 until the end of this turn. So, it's an extender that you can summon. It does not have any kind of restriction on how often you can do that, so if you open multiple, you can drop multiple, and there are ways to, double its level or to utilize other cards to boost its levels, so there's stuff you can do to make it work. This is a mandatory 3-up simply because it doesn't have any real restrictions, so you can push your Cipher strategy forward as best you can with your, within the confines of the deck's restrictions. Cipher Tranger is good and bad at the same time. I understand that's probably kind of a cop-out, but allow me to go through it at least. It's a level 1 spellcaster. If this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can target one Cipher Xyz monster you control, attach this card to it as material. It's fine. It doesn't come up all that often. Usually when you're doing your rank up combos, you're going to have plenty of material anyway, but it does have neat interactions with Neo, Galaxy Eye, Cipher Dragon, so I suppose the fact that that's a built-in effect doesn't really hurt anything. Where it really shines is the second effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one Cipher spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Now, you can only use one of these effects per turn. It is a hard once per turn and an exclusive once per turn, but generally, if you discard this with Raptor, you can special something and then search one of your Cipher cards, which we'll get to briefly in a moment, and be able to, go into a rank 8 and ideally go up from there. So it's not a bad card, and you're working with such a limited pool of Cipher cards that you have to play this. Alright, and last but not least for the monsters is Storm Cipher, a level 4 Dark Cyburst monster. This is relatively recent. It came out in the Power Code Link Structure deck. Now, it's not exactly good because it has 0 synergy with any of your other Cipher cards and doesn't even share typing, but it does as follows: cannot attack directly or monsters in the extra monster zone, unaffected by monster effects activated in the extra monster zone, cannot be destroyed by battle with monsters in the extra monster zone. So there's a lot of effects going on here. None of them are all that prevalent. Nowadays, you don't even have to summon your extra deck monsters to the extra monster zone except for Link, so there are millions of ways to get over this, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't offer you any kind of inherent advantage, it doesn't enhance your game state, and it doesn't really combo with any of your other pieces either. It's just a Cipher in name, and I did feel like it was only fair to include it. I did not play any of this, and unless you're playing some weird Cyber's deck with a very limited card pool, I don't think this card is very good at all. Moving on to spells, there's not too many. We've got Rank Up Magic Cipher Ascension, which is a quick play spell that states, during either player's main phase, target one Cipher Xyz monster you control, special summon from your extra deck one Cipher Xyz monster that is 1 rank higher than that target, using it as the material. This is treated as an Xyz summon. Also, attach any materials on it to the new summon monster. It gains the following effect. This card gains 500 attack for each level 4 or higher monster you control. One of the biggest problems that this deck faces is that you don't often have a lot of excess monsters on the board after you make your play, so as a result, it's not like anything you summon is going to get significant boosts from this. But it's still searchable and does allow you to, A, ladder up into one of your higher ranked Cipher monsters, and B, during, your opponent's main phase 2, you can use this, put something out, and then on your turn go off, I suppose. Ultimately, I ended up playing this at 1 in my build, though I did see some example builds that played more. I don't think that's necessary. I think some of the other rank up magic cards are actually better, and I didn't play any of those either. It's just kind of a shame how heavily they went on restricting this card. Moving on, we've got Cipher Bit, which is an existing trap. Target one Galaxy Eyes or Cipher Xyz monster you control. Attach this card to it as material, and if you do, the next time it would be destroyed by battle or card effect this turn, it is not destroyed. I've gone back and forth on this one. It's not a terrible card in the sense that it does allow protection and can stack a material, but it also doesn't do much for you. It's just kind of there. Like, a lot of times when I had this card in my opening hand, I was like, I really wish this was something else. Searching it off of Entranger isn't too bad and is like a decent enough protection play, but there's traps that do much more for you that are better dedicated space. At max, I would play this at 1, but I didn't love it in testing, and I think, realistically speaking, you can find better options. One that I was really intrigued by, but unfortunately couldn't get it into the deck, is if a Cipher Spectrum. One that I was really intrigued by, but I couldn't really find a way to fit it into the deck, is Cipher Spectrum. If a Cipher Xyz monster you control that has material is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, target one of those monsters, special summon it. Then special summon one Xyz monster from your extra deck with the same name as that monster. On paper, this seems neat. Let's say your Galaxy Eye Cipher Dragon is destroyed, you revive it and bring out a duplicate, and you do have cards that allow you to attach themselves as material, so there are ways to go ahead and make use of those monsters. But the restriction of A, needing it to be destroyed by battle, and B, an opponent's card effect, means more often than not, there are many ways that this is going to be dead because your opponent's going to find other ways to get around your monsters, to the point where it's going to be a bricky card. I think as a side deck card against decks that are very heavy on destruction, you could consider it, but again, in today's day and age, it just doesn't pack the punch that it would maybe 10 years ago, were this archetype around, or when, XEs first came out. It's a little too slow, and hopefully, if they do continue to make Cipher support in the future, they'll give them some support that is similar to this, but perhaps more modernized and not as reliant on specific destruction. Alright, Double Cipher, probably my favorite one because it is the easiest one to resolve, but ironically I ended up not playing any in the build either, is a normal trap. If your opponent controls a monster with the highest attack on the field, even if tied, target one Galaxy Eyes or Cipher Xyz monster you control that has material. Detach all materials from it, then special summon one Xyz monster from your extra deck with the same name as that monster. On paper, this again seems pretty solid. You don't even have to rely on destruction, but most of the Galaxy Eyes and or Cipher monsters have 3,000 or more attack points. There's not going to be many situations in which your opponent has the strongest monster on the field, and if they do, that monster usually has negation built in, or the ability to shut down your cards to the point where even resolving this is not going to net you any real advantage. So while it does have amazing artwork, that's about the most I can say for it. I elected to play 0 in my build. Moving on to the extra deck, which is where some of Cipher's strongest cards lie, we've got Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon. This is a rank 8 requiring 2 level 8 monsters. Once per turn, you can detach a material from this card, target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Monsters you control cannot attack your opponent directly for the rest of this turn, except this card. Also, take control of that target until the end phase, but while this effect is applied, negate its effects, and its attack becomes 3,000. Also, its name becomes Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon. In other words, it takes the opponent's monster, negates its effects, and makes it a copy of itself. This is neat because you can overlay with your extra deck from some of your higher ranked Cipher Xyz monsters, basically keeping your opponent's monster. This is a good card, and generally speaking, even outside of Ciphers, is one of the better rank 8s in the game, though it doesn't see as much play nowadays because there are just so many options to choose from. But in terms of what Cipher has going for it, this is probably the best card the deck actually has, at least from the original run of cards that they got. Next up is Galaxy Eyes Cipher Blade Dragon. This one is from Ghost from the Past, and has the following effect. You can also Xyz summon this card by using a rank 8 Galaxy Eyes monster you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. Again, not terrible. It can self-ladder up, so if you have Galaxy Eyes Cipher, you can just put it right on top, bring it up. It's a decent combo. Cannot be used as Xyz material, so this card itself cannot ladder up. Once per turn, you can detach one material from this card, then target one card on the field, destroy it. Solid popping. If this Xyz summon card you control is destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster, or an opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can target one Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon in your graveyard, special summon it. So this is insanely restrictive after you get past that first effect. An opponent's attacking monster means you can't even ram this into something, and an opponent's card effect is just your opponent knows it's there. If they're going to choose to pop it, they're typically going to have ways around it, and reviving a Cipher Dragon with no material is not going to do anything for you, at least not until your own turn if you rank it up into something else. But because it's a free rank up and you can just place it on top of another monster, it is worth playing one of in. Alright, one that I like a lot is Neo Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon. This one does feel like it has a lot of potential, although it is a little tricky to bring out. If this card has a Cipher card as material, it gains this effect. Once per turn, you can detach up to 3 Xyz materials from this card. Monsters you control cannot attack your opponent directly for the rest of this turn, except this card. Also, for each material detached, take control of one face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase, but their effects are negated, their attacks become 4,500, and their names become Neo Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon. In other words, this functions very similar to Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon, except you can take multiple monsters. And it does not target, which is probably one of the best things it has going for it. You can quite literally take opponents' monsters without having to target, and that is easily its best attribute. Making the attacks 4,500 is fine. They can't attack directly, but I guess you can beat over other monsters if they're there. Typically, if you're able to put this card on the board and the opponent doesn't stop it, you can win games with it, simply because of how powerful it is, and the fact that on its own it's 4,500. Combined with a few extra monsters you're taking, you're able to do a lot of damage. The best thing it has is that there's no additional restrictions on what you do with the monsters you take, so you can link away with them or overlay them for a different Cipher monster if their names become Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon, which we'll get to in just a moment. Now, Galaxy Eyes Cipher X Dragon is a new card. Once per turn, you can Xyz summon this card using a Cipher Dragon monster you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. So first of all, if you take an opponent's monster with Neo Galaxy Eyes Cipher, that monster becomes a Cipher Dragon monster, and then you can actually go ahead and Xyz summon this just using that opponent's monster. It's really effective, at least in terms of, the limited combos the deck has. You can attach 2 materials from this card. Your opponent cannot target light monsters you control with card effects until the end of your opponent's next turn. Decent, built-in pseudo-protection, I suppose, is not as easy to get over. Once per turn during your standby phase, you can return 1 rank 9 or lower Dragon Xyz monster from your graveyard to the extra deck. Then you can special summon that monster from the extra deck using this card as material. This is neat because it does allow you to bring out cards like Draglubion and Numeron Dragon, which the deck does play, and you can summon them after they've been destroyed, getting combos off with their effects without really having any drawbacks to yourself. That's, of course, assuming that this card, survives until your standby phase, but depending on how you play the combos out, it is definitely doable. This is a card I played around 1 to 2 copies of in a few builds before ultimately settling on 1 just for spacer. Now, moving on to the new cards, and what really inspired me to make this video to kind of take an in-depth look at this archetype, Cipher Biplane is arguably the best standalone piece of support the deck has. A level 6 light machine, once per turn, you can target 2 Cipher monsters you control. Their levels become 8 until the end of this turn. That is a key to being able to pull off combos with any sense of consistency. If a Cipher monster is normal or special summon, you can special summon this card from your hand. So there you go, you summon Raptor, you special this, you immediately have a rank 8 play, and depending on the rest of your hand, you can choose what direction to go in. If you want to use Raptor's effect and get an additional summon, you can, but then you do put yourself in a situation where you're locked into Ciphers. You don't have to necessarily do that at all. You can just go second, summon this, and whatever else you normal summon, and make Draglubion, put a Numeron Dragon out, and you have a chance to attack for a lot of damage, depending on the duel. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can banish it, add 1 Cipher monster from your deck to your hand. So it is a floater. It's not typically going to come up, but it is able to be triggered off of your own card effect destruction. So if in some way that were to be the case, or you were playing a deck or combo where that was applicable, you do have a little bit more flexibility with him. Now, double exposure is one I like a lot, but it's not called Cipher exposure, Cipher double exposure, meaning it's not searchable. If it was, I think it would be significantly better. That being said, it's still something you're going to have to play. You can target 2 level 6 or lower monsters on the field with the same name. Double their levels. This is good for Cipher, but also in general just good for other decks. I mean, it's not as good of a combo as it would have been years ago, but something like summoning a tour guide and bringing out another tour guide and then making them level 6s gives you access to a lot more monsters. That's kind of a slow combo at this day and age, but you never know what might come up in the future. You can target 1 Cipher monster you control at the start of the battle phase. The name of 1 other face-up monster on the field becomes the targeted Cipher monster's name until the end phase. That effect is neat for one reason and one reason only, and that is our final card. Cipher Interference. During damage calculation, if your Cipher monster battles while another monster with the same name is on the field, you can double your battling monster's attack until the end of the battle phase. This is a hard once per turn effect, but using double exposure, you basically target that opponent's monster, make it whatever your Cipher monster is, and then your monster battles and gets its attack doubled. If you're using one of your Xyz monsters, you can pretty much run over anything, but even some of your weaker monsters, if you're in a shitty spot and just have to stall for time to run something over, are able to utilize this effect pretty well. There is also the ability of, just generally speaking, if you control 2 Ciphers with the same name, but that's not the most common use for this. It's basically meant to be used in conjunction with double exposure to get maximum use out of it. So now that we've gone through all of the Cipher cards, let's take a look at a few deck profiles I found online that I wanted to get an inspiration for the build, and what basically allowed me to model my own build of this deck. Alright guys, so I got 3 deck profiles here that I grabbed. These are not my builds at all. I just found them online in different places, and I figured I'd at least take a look at what people were building. These are all relatively recent. One of them I think does include the new stuff. Other 2 maybe don't, but I'm not really sure what the builds are going for. So this first one's pretty straightforward. Triple Entangler, triple Mirror Knight, triple Wing. 3 Storm Cipher, which I'm not a huge fan of, like I talked about. It's just kind of useless. It doesn't really feel like it does anything for the deck. 3 of the Wing and 3 of the Biplane, and that's it for their monsters. So there's no hand traps here at all, which I think, considering the fact that this deck is heavily reliant on the combos actually being resolved and very susceptible to being countered. Hand traps are so important. You don't have to play a ton, but my build's got at least 6. I've tried a few different incarnations playing between 6 to 8. This one doesn't have any. And then, of course, there's random cards like Titanocider and Lost Wind, both one-ofs. I don't know what the intent was here. Xyz Import, decent card. I do think it's like cute in Utopia decks because of its, non-destroying removal, but I don't know that it fits here. Monster Reborn is what it is. Triple Impermanence, I think that's fine. Crackdown is one I considered. I think I like Ice Dragon's Prison better, but you can sort of, you will play traps in the deck for sure. And then this guy's got all kinds of random stuff. To Call the Haunted, Unending Nightmare, decent card. Doesn't feel like it fits in the main deck here. One-ofs for those spells, like I said, I feel like with the double spell, you have to max that out at 3, just because of how important it is to get to, and it's not searchable. Dark Factory of More Production is a draw card that, again, doesn't feel like it really works, and it looks like Magic Planter is in here as some kind of pseudo-draw engine. I just think that if you're going to go that route, Pot of Prosperity is just a much better option. And the extra deck is pretty straightforward with triple Cipher Dragon, Cipher X, and then the supports. I really don't think you need to go this heavy where you're 8 deep for the Cipher, oh, 9 actually for the Cipher. Cards, they are recyclable on some, and I think not playing Draglubion and Numeron in here is just silly. But that is the first build. The second one I like a little bit more. It seems more focused for sure. There's the hand traps in there. They're tripling up on all of the main Cipher cards except for Storm. 3 Summoner Monk, which isn't awful. I mean, it does function similarly to Raptor without the restrictions. It's just that you kind of have to use your normal summon on it and then discard a spell. It is something I considered. I didn't end up putting it in my final build, but it's not something that's a terrible idea. Triple Ash, and then 2 Ghost Spell and 2 Nibiru. I think I'm actually playing triple Nibiru. We'll take a look at my build at the end of this, but it's not awful. Triple of the Cipher spell that doubles the attack. I think 1 to 2 is fine. It's a hard once per turn, so there's really no need to max it out. It can dead draw, and you're already going to be susceptible to dead draws here. 3 of the double spell, which I said is definitely necessary. The rank up magic at 3, I think 1 at most. I don't even love the card, honestly, but it's searchable. It's a quick play. It does have some uses. Prosperity's got to be maxed out at 3 here, I think, just because of how little consistency you have in terms of getting to your key combo pieces. And then Call by the Grave is fine. Imperms are fine. I don't like Upstart here. I do like the card, but I just feel like there's other things you could be playing. Feather Duster, Monster Reborn, Foolish Burial, which turns into a search. So, not the best build. I did play with this a little. It wasn't exactly optimal, but it did function better than the first one for whatever that's worth. And the last build I grabbed, very, very different approach here. This is an older one, but there really weren't many in terms of just looking around for actually posted Cipher decks to pull from. This had triple BES Core MK2, which just is being a level 8 is really all it has going for it. Guardian of Order is a level 8 machine. You can special it. I see he's playing that with Trade-In. I don't like it, personally. Triple of the Cipher Raptor and Wing. Obviously, those are both good. I think you max out Mirror Knight as well. I don't like Ash at 2. In my opinion, Ash is pretty strongly a 3 or 0 card, and Ghost Spell is decent, counters Drytron, but, this 4 hand trap thing doesn't really work for me, especially when you look at some of the random card choices, like Desires at 1, Trade-In at 2. I mean, if you're going to play the package for Trade-In, you might as well max it out, but I don't like that BES core. Galaxy Queen's Light modifies the levels of monsters so that they all match the level of another monster on the field, but in this case, you have your new cards that do this, like Biplane. So this is definitely an older build for sure. Not super old, but before the new support was announced. Photon Sanctuary is decent, but it serves no purpose in this deck. It definitely has more benefits in Galaxy. It doesn't really contribute here. Foolish Monster Born solid. Prosperity's got to be at 3 in the deck, I think. Or, I mean, maybe Extravagance, but I think Prosperity is much better because you are reliant on your extra deck and you want to have some control over what you're banishing. I do like Summon Limit a lot. I've been playing around with it quite a bit. If you could put one of your big monsters out at first, it does make a nice control element, but then it's kind of stuck on the field. Ultimately, the reason I decided to go with Ice Dragon's Prison instead, because I do think it gives me a little bit more control over the matchups, but it's a good card. And then the 2 strikes, 2 impermanence. These numbers are all over the place. It just doesn't really do it for me. It's not super consistent, and it doesn't feel like the deck is focused on one strategy. It seems like they're trying to shoehorn 8s in with 4s, and I think you're better off just focusing on Cipher's main playstyle. Don't mind the extra deck too much. I think Bujin Arashima is decent, actually, but I wouldn't particularly you know, love cards like the Hoshingen and Soul Flare. You can do better with this. I think Draglubion and Numeron Dragon are way too good not to play, and the combos are obviously there for it. So these are just a few of the decks that are floating out there that I was able to find and replicate. Not a huge fan, but I at least was able to get an idea for what the core of my deck was going to look like by playing with these. So without further ado, let's jump into my actual deck profile, and I'll try to give you guys a bit of rationale behind it as we bring this Cipher discussion to a close. Alright, so I played around with those decks, tried them out, did what I could. Like I said, the build's kind of varied, and Cipher's not exactly the most popular archetype, so it wasn't easy to find like a large sample size of competitive decks from well-known players. I pretty much had to pick and choose from what was there and try my best to come up with my own build. Now, I do not love this build, however, in testing, it went 4-3, so just above 500. Not exactly the best record, but you're playing with Cipher, so there's only so much you could do. I am very much interested to see what type of decks people can come up with, so if you have your own builds or there's things I didn't cover in this video, definitely share the links and or comments with specifics on your deck. But this is what I came up with for a finished product. So we've got triple Nibiru. I think that Nibiru is one of the best hand traps in the game still, and I think in a deck like this, especially where you're really able to utilize Nibiru's additional effects with your monsters being able to take control of things. There's different stuff you can do, some cute little combos I had where you put a Nibiru token on your opponent's field and then you take control of it with a Galaxy-Eyed Cipher Dragon, and, you know, there's just some neat stuff you can do there to clear the board. And then I've got 3 Ash Blossom and 3 Drolan Lock. That rounds out the hand traps, so 9 out of 40 cards in the deck are hand traps. I do think that as combo-oriented as the deck is, and as easily stoppable as the deck is, you really do need to be able to shut your opponent down early on so that you have even a slight chance to make plays. There were some scenarios where I would have liked to have, you know, a little bit more flexibility, but having those hand traps is just super helpful, and those, I think, are the 3 best options. I did not elect to play Ghost Bell. I think it's good against Drytron, but I think Cycle Reader does a better job and would be a solid sideboard card if I was actually building a side deck for this. For the Ciphers, we've got 3 Biplane. Straightforward, like I said, really good card. Didn't break all that often. As long as you saw another Cipher in hand, you could resolve its effect. It's definitely a powerful card. Twin Raptor as a 3-of, you kind of have to max out on it. It's good if you open it and they don't stop the play. If it gets impermanence or something, you're in a really shitty spot unless you opened like Cipher Wing or Biplane to go ahead and extend your plays. But it, you know, it does what it needs to, I suppose, within the confines of the deck. Obviously, Summoner Monk does a much better job, but it doesn't get the level benefits that these other ones do. 3 Cipher Wing, this is the best, you know, like I said, extender that you have. It doesn't really have any drawbacks, you just special it. So you can occasionally go into something like Utopia or Exiton, but typically you're hoping to get that level double up so that you can put something out like Draglubion and go into Numeron Dragon if you're going second. I OTK'd a few times with that, and, you know, you can build your Cipher combos. Ultimately, the problem that really stems from all of this is the fact that you can't make a lot of combo plays because you get locked into Ciphers, and that means you're pretty much unable to utilize the best combo cards to their fullest potential, but that's the nature of the deck, unfortunately. Triple Mirror Knight, again, just a really good card to have for searching purposes. You want to maximize your chances of opening a Cipher plus Biplane or Wing. And then 3 Entranger, it's definitely the best pure, like, card to open with something else. You get a search if you discard it off Raptor, plus it can attach itself as material to something, so it has a lot of uses. But again, it can brick, and if you don't open Biplane, you're in a really shitty spot because you can find yourself without any real plays to make. So that rounds out the monsters. Spells are pretty straightforward with the 1-ofs, Harpy's Feather Duster, Reborn, Called by the Grave, all cards I felt were necessary, especially because Reborn does give you a slight chance to play through a negate, which this deck has critical issues with. Prosperity has to be played at 3 in here. I don't think that's even debatable. You need the draw power, and Extravagance takes too many cards out of your extra deck, and it's random. The extra consistency is solid and definitely something that is appreciated, especially because the deck doesn't really give you any draw power outside of it. One of the Cipher rank up magic spell, this card bricked more often than not, but it does have, you know, some uses to ladder up quickly into Neo Galaxy Eyes Cipher Dragon, which, while cool looking and has a powerful effect, it's just not very practical. You're not going to resolve it all that often. Double exposures at 3 here. Like I said, it is the best spell they have, and it does really do a solid job helping you to accelerate putting out your rank 8 monsters. Playing 2 of the other Cipher spell, doubling the attack is solid. It lets you run stuff over, but again, it's just, you're really struggling to make anything work here. And then triple impermanence and 1 Cipher bit to close it out. I did end up putting bit in just because it is searchable, and so it also acts as an extra material while providing protection to your big boss monsters. Extra deck's pretty straightforward too. You've got the package with the Ciphers, 2 Cipher Dragon, 2 Cipher X, 1 Neo Cipher, and then 1 Cipher Blade. And then, of course, you've got Hope Harbinger, Draglubion, number 107. Number 107 does count as a Galaxy Eyes monster, so some of the effects that directly benefit Galaxy Eyes Xyz monsters, it does get those. Utopia and Utopia the Lightning, just because you will occasionally have those 2 4s on the field. Same reasoning behind Exiton. I would have played Utopia double, but double or nothing just adds another brick card to this. Numeron Dragons for summon off Draglubion. That was most of my wins, was doing that to make that an attack for 9k. And the fact that that's your biggest win condition pretty much says enough that you need to say about why the deck is not very good. And then 1 Nightmare Unicorn and 1 Phoenix just to have a few out options. I don't think I went into them much at all. So I did the best that I could to try and make this somewhat playable given the confines, and I do think it's a really cool archetype with some neat concepts. I like the level manipulation stuff that they have going on and the name copying, but the deck's going to need a lot more than just a few support cards it'll get in Animation Chronicle. That's going to wrap it up for this first video of this type. Let me know what you guys think. I do plan on making this a weekly or bi-weekly type thing. It does take a lot of editing. This was a lot more in-depth than some of my previous videos. So if there's other decks you want to see featured and or decks that you're curious about, please drop them down below and let me know. As always, share the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video.